That muggy Wednesday morning, no cameras were rolling. No journalists were watching. No security guards were blocking the way. But what happened in just a few minutes on that Sunset Boulevard sidewalk would be remembered as one of the most unexpected encounters of the year. An invisible man, ignored by nearly everyone, reached out his hand, and on the other side was one of the greatest sports icons in the world. No one could have imagined that a simple request for $5 would become headline news in the following days, and even less that it would mark the beginning of a turning point that not even LeBron James himself had foreseen. The homeless man's name was Elijah Carter. He was 54 years old, with a thick beard, sunken eyes, and an expression that hovered between distrust and resignation. Since losing his wife to cancer, and soon after, his job and home, Elijah had been surviving on the streets of Los Angeles, carrying a worn blanket on his back and a cardboard sign with faded letters that read, "Hungry. Any help is welcome." That morning, Elijah was standing on the corner of Vine Street and Sunset, the sun already high and scorching his face. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. That's when he noticed a tall man approaching, wearing a cap, sunglasses, and a simple t-shirt. His plain clothing didn't hint at wealth, but his posture said everything. Without recognizing the face behind the glasses, Elijah simply extended his hand. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you. Would you happen to have $5? Just to get a bite to eat around the corner." The man stopped. For a moment, he didn't respond. He just looked at him, not with judgment, but with something much rarer: respect. Then, in a calm voice, he asked, "Just 5?" Elijah hesitated, embarrassed. "I don't want to take advantage. It's all I need." The man gave a slight smile. "You know what that tells me? That you still believe in the value of little. And that is rare." Without another word, the man pulled out his wallet, and instead of handing him a $5 bill, he gave Elijah 100. Elijah froze. This is too much. Why? The answer was short. Because no one should have to beg to eat. And sometimes what seems small is just the start of something much bigger. Before Elijah could say another word, the man was already walking toward a black car parked across the street. No security, no film crew. Just him. That's when a teenager, who had been watching everything from a distance, ran across the street and shouted, eyes wide, "Dude, do you know who that was?" Elijah shook his head. That was LeBron James. It would take hours for the news to go viral. But in that moment, everything was still quiet. LeBron had already disappeared, and Elijah stood holding the money with trembling hands, trying to process whether what had just happened was even real. What neither Elijah nor the world knew yet was that LeBron had just come from a philanthropic meeting in the area. Behind the scenes, he had been working on a quiet social project to help rehabilitate homeless individuals who showed potential for a new beginning. And something in Elijah's eyes had touched a nerve few things could. But for Elijah, it was still all about survival. With the money in hand, he didn't buy alcohol, nor cigarettes, nor drugs. He walked to the corner diner, bought a simple burger, a bottle of water, and an orange juice. Then, with the change, he returned and gave half of it to a woman who had been sleeping 2 sidewalks down. Her name was Clarice, and she had shared that same patch of pavement with him for months. "Eat something, Clarice. Today, luck smiled on me," he said, not knowing those words would later be repeated on television. And that's how everything began. Because what Elijah didn't know was that a security camera from a nearby commercial building had recorded the entire interaction. And one of the employees, upon recognizing LeBron in the footage, posted the video on Twitter with the caption, "LeBron James gave $100 to a homeless man on Sunset Boulevard." But what that man did next is even more inspiring. The video would rack up more than 18 million views in just 24 hours. And Elijah until then invisible, was about to become known to the whole world. The next morning, the morning after his encounter with LeBron James, Elijah Carter returned to the same sidewalk where he had slept for the past few months. His feet still ached, his knees stiff from the cold night, and his mind trying to process what had happened the day before. What he didn't know was that, as he brushed his teeth with a water bottle and wiped his face with a damp cloth, his name was already spreading across social media nationwide. The video had been posted at midnight. Within hours, it had grown beyond anything anyone, not even LeBron, could have expected. In the recording, captured by the building's surveillance camera, you could clearly see the moment Elijah approached the athlete, extended his hand, and received far more than he asked for. But what truly captivated viewers came afterward. Elijah calmly walking to the corner diner, buying food, and then handing part of what he had to another homeless woman, Clarice. The footage showed something rarely captured with such clarity: compassion among the invisible. And the caption that came with the video stirred deep emotions. This man asked for $5. LeBron gave him $100. He used part of it to eat and shared the rest with someone else living on the street. Generosity creates ripples beyond what we can see. In less than 12 hours, the post had over 10 million views, sparking a wave of comments, shares, and inquiries from journalists trying to find the man in the video. But Elijah still knew nothing. While morning shows discussed the video, analysts praised LeBron, and influencers reposted the scene with motivational quotes. Elijah carried on with his routine. He had used the remaining money to buy a new pair of socks, decent soap, and 2 egg sandwiches for the day. Later, he spent part of the afternoon trying to get a spot at a shelter, with no luck. The spots filled up before sunset. By late afternoon, he was back on his usual sidewalk corner with Clarice. They shared the second sandwich while talking about their past. She mentioned grandchildren she hadn't seen in years. He talked about a son he wasn't even sure still lived in the city. Only in the early evening did something different happen. A young man with a backpack and phone in hand approached, eyes wide. "Hey, it's you, right? The guy from the video?" Elijah frowned. "What video?" "The one with LeBron. It's everywhere. Man, you're famous." He showed Elijah his phone, where his face appeared in a video with millions of likes. Elijah froze. He watched it all as if he were looking at someone else. "Why? Is this online?" A building's camera caught everything. "I'm serious. You're news now. People are looking for you." Elijah stood up, still in disbelief. The idea that the world was watching that moment, something that, to him, was just a gesture of hunger and gratitude, left him uneasy. "This'll be gone tomorrow. People forget fast," he said, trying to convince himself. But he was wrong. Cross town, in Brentwood, LeBron James sat silently in his living room, watching the video. His wife, Savannah, beside him, commented, "He shared the money with someone else. Did you see that?" LeBron didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the screen. "Most guys would have vanished with that money, but he murmured. That's when he made a decision. He called his agent and said plainly, "I want to find that man, quietly, and hear his story." The team sprang into action. Within 48 hours, they contacted local NGOs, shelters, and outreach groups. The footage was enhanced, searching for clues, the neighborhood, surroundings, any detail that might lead them to Elijah Carter. Meanwhile, the public reaction kept growing. The public wants to know, who is Elijah Carter? On social media, hashtags began trending. "Where is Elijah? Carter $5 man." "Heart bigger than the sky on TV shows." Experts debated the psychological impact of empathy. And Elijah, a regular man, poor, homeless, had become a symbol. A reminder that dignity can survive even in the worst conditions. But the story was just beginning. Because LeBron James wasn't the only one looking for Elijah. A certain lawyer in a light gray suit had also recognized that face. And inside his briefcase there was an envelope with a handwritten name: Micah Carter. As social media turned Elijah Carter into a modern-day empathy icon, one man was watching it all with a heavy heart. Seated in a minimalist office in downtown Los Angeles, attorney Bernard Huxley held a brown envelope bearing a name he hadn't seen in over a decade: Micah Carter. Elijah's son. The last time Bernard had heard of Elijah was during an eviction hearing. He had lost his house after failing to keep up with payments, a downward spiral triggered by addiction following his wife's death. The legal battle was quiet. No media, no defense, no happy ending. Just another case in a sea of thousands. But the name, the weary face, and the way Elijah had shared his money with another homeless man that made Bernard sit up. He knew Micah still lived in the city, working at a tech company with a stable career and, last anyone heard, a recent marriage. The break between father and son had been quiet, but brutal. Micah, then 19, had sworn never to speak to his father again after finding him drunk and collapsed at their front door. Elsewhere in the city, LeBron's team continued searching for Elijah. A nonprofit called Light on the Street eventually identified the area where Elijah used to sleep and eat donated meals. They confirmed Elijah Carter was known among social workers as a peaceful, respectful man, always willing to help others. Even though he had almost nothing, LeBron James decided he wanted to meet him in person. Quietly. No media. No cameras. This wasn't a PR stunt. It was personal. Meanwhile, Elijah himself began to feel the effects of the viral video. People started recognizing him on the street. Some brought food. Others left handwritten notes. "You inspired me." But alongside the praise came the comments that cut like a knife. "He's only famous because LeBron showed up. He's probably lying. Bet he'll spend it all on booze. This will blow over. Everyone will forget about him soon." Even with the kind gestures, the doubts remained. Elijah didn't understand why he was being sought out. He couldn't grasp how such a simple act had grown so big. And most of all, he had no idea what was coming next. By the end of that week, LeBron James showed up, unannounced, at the Light on the Street shelter. He wore a hoodie, cap, and face mask, but was still recognized almost instantly. The shelter's coordinator, a white-haired woman named Teresa, greeted him with a surprised smile. "Mr. James? In person? Just LeBron, please. I'm here for Elijah Carter." Teresa led him to a private room and opened the informal file they kept on each regular guest. "He came by last night, slept here. He's resting now after some rough days, but I can call him if you'd like." LeBron was quiet for a few moments, then nodded. "I just want to talk. Nothing more." Teresa stepped out. Minutes later, Elijah walked in. He froze when he saw who was sitting in front of him. This time, without disguise, no cap, no glasses. The most famous player in the NBA was there. And Elijah didn't know what to say. LeBron stood up and extended his hand. "Now you know who I am." "I do," Elijah replied with a tired smile. "But I still don't understand why you're here." LeBron didn't hesitate. "Because in your place, most people would have kept that money. But you chose to share it. And that says everything about who you are. The world needs to see that. Needs to remember that." Elijah took a deep breath. "But the world forgets fast, LeBron. I know how this works. Tomorrow, they'll be chasing the next viral video. Maybe. But today, you have their attention. And maybe that could be used for something bigger." That's when the conversation shifted. LeBron didn't offer charity. He offered partnership. A plan to launch a pilot program under Elijah's name. A reintegration initiative for homeless individuals with work history and good conduct. Starting with a single unit in Los Angeles, Elijah's voice cracked. "Me? With my name on it?" "Yes, because you're not a symbol of failure. You're a symbol of resilience." And in that moment, for the first time in years, Elijah Carter believed that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't invisible anymore. LeBron James's proposal lingered in the air for a few days. Elijah Carter, still stunned by everything happening, struggled to believe that someone like LeBron genuinely wanted his name attached to a social project. After all, he was just a man who had asked for $5. Nothing more. But LeBron was persistent. Not pushy, not rushing. He just kept showing up, at the shelter, at alleyways where Elijah slept, and sat beside him, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories from his childhood in Akron, the hardships, the moments he too had doubted he could ever escape the fate that awaited poor boys in his neighborhood. That unexpected closeness began to shape something deeper, an unlikely friendship between two men from opposite worlds, both carrying the weight of more than they ever should have. By the following Monday, LeBron held a discreet press conference. No red carpet, no stadium crowd, just a modest room in the Light on the Street Community Center where reporters gathered with little idea what to expect. When the athlete entered, he wasn't alone. Beside him, wearing a plain shirt, neatly trimmed hair, and a shaved beard, stood Elijah Carter. Photographers barely recognized him at first. The man who had made headlines for a simple act of kindness now looked entirely different. But the eyes were the same, worn by time, lined with scars. LeBron spoke plainly. The world saw a viral video, but what it didn't see was the heart behind that gesture. Elijah Carter didn't ask for fame. He didn't ask for help. He asked for $5, and with 100, he fed someone else. Pause. That made me ask myself, why not turn small acts into real structures? That's why today, I'm announcing the creation of the Elijah Carter Foundation, which will begin with a pilot program focused on rehabilitation, training, and social reintegration for people experiencing homelessness. This foundation's name is not a trophy. It's a symbol. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then the applause began. Hesitant at first, then thunderous. Elijah, standing beside LeBron, simply bowed his head, overcome with emotion. That very night, newspapers splashed headlines like, "LeBron James turns viral gesture into social project. Meet Elijah Carter." From anonymity to hope. The homeless man who inspired a quiet revolution. And for the first time in years, Elijah didn't sleep on the sidewalk. He slept in a bed, in a clean room, with doors that closed, and a strange feeling of peace. While Elijah experienced the relief of a fresh start, a meeting on the other side of town was about to change everything once again. Attorney Bernard Huxley had finally managed to locate Micah Carter. Working in a modern building, the young man was now a senior analyst at a digital security firm. Tall, well-dressed, always with earbuds in. He seemed to have left the past behind, or at least tried to. "Mr. Carter?" Bernard said, catching him outside his workplace. "My name is Bernard Huxley. I'm an attorney. I'm here about your father." Micah stopped walking. "My father?" he replied coldly. "Is he dead?" "No, quite the opposite. He's alive, and the entire world is talking about him right now." Micah pulled out his phone. Upon typing Elijah Carter and seeing the flood of videos, interviews, hashtags, and headlines, his eyes lost focus for a moment. "This is impossible. Your father has changed, Micah, and maybe you should see him before it's too late." But Micah simply turned his back. He had his chance, and walked away. The attorney stood still, holding an envelope, sighing. Inside was an unfinished document, a letter written by Elijah, never sent, where he wrote, "Micah, if you ever see me again, I might still be dirty, or maybe clean, but in any version, I'm still your father, and I still love you." But at that moment, Micah didn't want to hear anything. He just wanted to forget. Little did he know, the reunion wasn't as far off as he thought. Micah Carter spent the next 2 days trying to avoid any news about Elijah. But it was impossible. Social media algorithms were relentless. With every scroll, there he was, the man who had abandoned him, now transformed into a national symbol of resilience. Videos appeared in every format. People crying, influencers commenting, TV shows replaying the $5 request moment as if it were an urban miracle. But for Micah, it was just an old wound being exposed to the world. He remembered a childhood with a present, playful father who made pancakes on Sundays and told bedtime stories. But he also remembered watching that same man fall apart after Lorraine's death, Micah's mother. Addiction came like a silent thief. First it was just sadness, then drinks, then shouting, and eventually, disappearance. Micah was only 19 when he left home. There was no fight, no hateful words, just a dry goodbye, sealed by silence. "If you ever want to change, come find me," he had told his father the last time. But Elijah never came, at least, not directly. Now, years later, the world was applauding the same man who had left him behind. Meanwhile, the social project named after Elijah was taking shape. The Elijah Carter Foundation was officially registered, and behind the scenes, entrepreneurs, NGOs, and even government agencies wanted to get involved. The difference was simple. Instead of temporary charity, the initiative focused on real rebuilding, courses, job placement, psychological assistance, and legal support. Even more, each individual's story would be treated with dignity. No humiliating videos, no spectacle, just quiet transformation, built with respect. LeBron oversaw everything closely, but he knew that for the project to grow, Elijah needed to step into a new role, spokesperson. That's when the invitation came. A live interview on the show, Urban Voices, hosted by the renowned journalist Julia Merritt. Elijah hesitated. "I'm just a guy from the street. I've never spoken in front of a camera." LeBron placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to be perfect. Just be honest." In the studio, minutes before the broadcast, Elijah was trembling. He wore a borrowed suit, still a bit loose at the shoulders, and kept rubbing his chin whenever the nerves returned. On the other side of the screen, millions of viewers waited to hear him, including Micah, who, despite himself, turned on the TV at the exact moment the host announced, "And today, we have a very special guest. A man who spent years being invisible until his kindness caught the world's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Elijah Carter." The interview began with gentle questions about the streets, hunger, the moment with LeBron. But it was in the second segment that Julia asked the question that shifted the tone. "Elijah, do you have family?" He swallowed hard. I have. "A son. Micah. I haven't seen him in years." "Would you like to see him again?" A long pause. "More than anything. But he saw me at my worst, and I never had the courage to show up at my best." The camera zoomed in on his tear-filled eyes. "Micah, if you're watching this, know that I understand if you're still angry. But even from the bottom of the street, I never stopped loving you." Micah, at home, sitting on the couch, froze. His father's voice cut through the screen like a choking thunder. "I'm not the man I used to be. But every step I take now is so that one day I might deserve to be called Dad again." Silence. The journalist closed the segment with misty eyes, and Elijah left the studio unaware of the impact those words would have. The next morning, Micah woke up to over 20 messages from friends and colleagues. "Did you see the interview? Your father talked about you." "That was real, man." But he didn't respond to any of them. The confusion inside him was greater than any notification. Part of him wanted to forgive. Another part couldn't forget. But what he didn't yet know was that on that very day, Fate would bring them face to face, and no cameras would be around. The late afternoon fell over Los Angeles under a cloudy, heavy sky. In the city center, the community center of the Elijah Carter Foundation was getting ready for its official opening. Boxes being unloaded, equipment installed, brochures stacked at the reception. It was a new beginning under construction. Elijah had been there since early morning, helping wherever he could. He didn't ask for recognition. He asked for nothing but work. There was something in his eyes that the other volunteers respected, a kind of humility that didn't need to be announced. But at that same moment, across the street, someone was watching in silence. Micah Carter. Wearing dark jeans and a gray jacket, Micah stood there for more than 20 minutes, leaning against a lamppost, watching his father carry chairs, greet young volunteers, laugh at something someone said. That version of Elijah didn't resemble the man he remembered from darker days. There was no smell of alcohol, no confusion in his gaze. There was strength, purpose. Micah almost walked away. But before he could take the first step, the side door of the community center opened. Elijah came out holding a box of supplies, and as he looked up, he saw the young man standing on the sidewalk. For a moment, neither of them moved. Time stood still. Elijah set the box on the ground. Micah crossed the street, slowly. They stopped less than 2 meters from each other. "I thought maybe it was you," Elijah said, voice choked with emotion. "I saw the interview," Micah replied, his eyes steady. Silence. Elijah tried to hold back his emotion. "I never expected you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know. I never forgot about you. Not for a second." "I saw you too, Dad," Micah said, his voice softening. "I saw you broken. I saw you disappearing. And I tried to protect myself from all of that. But seeing you now, you're not the same man anymore, are you?" Elijah finished. "No," Micah sighed. "And that's what scares me." Elijah swallowed hard. "I understand. Real change is scary, even for those who live it." Micah's eyes welled up, but he held it in. "I don't know if I can call you Dad again." "Not yet," Elijah nodded. "Then call me Elijah, until I earn that title back." That's when Micah finally smiled. A faint but genuine smile. The first in years before that face. "Can I help you with the boxes?" he asked. "There's always work around here," Elijah replied. And so, without an audience, without spotlights, without cameras, father and son began again from scratch. That same night, LeBron James passed discreetly in front of the community center. He had received a security alert. Suspicious man standing outside watching the place for too long. When the cameras showed who it was, he dismissed any concern. He saw when Micah crossed the street, and he saw the reunion. He didn't smile, didn't comment. He simply turned off the monitor and whispered to himself, This is what it was all about. Not fame, not applause, but reconciliation." The reunion was recorded by no one, and that made it even more real. But the impact of the Elijah Carter Foundation was beginning to spread beyond Los Angeles. Cities like Chicago, Atlanta, and Houston had already made proposals to replicate the model. Companies were offering to fund programs. Schools wanted to partner to reintegrate at-risk youth. And at the center of it all, a man who, just weeks ago, had nowhere to sleep. That night, after finishing his shift, Elijah walked alongside Micah through the city streets. "Where are you sleeping now?" his son asked. "They offered me a room at the project's headquarters. Small, but safe." Micah gave a sideways smile. "I don't know if you would accept, but there's space at my place. For now. If you want." Elijah stopped. "I want to, but only as someone under construction. Still missing pieces, but trying not to collapse again." "Then come on." And together, they walked toward something neither of them dared call home. Not yet. But it was a beginning. That first night at Micah's house was quiet. Neither said much. Elijah stayed in the guest room, a small space, but with a real bed, clean sheets, and a lamp glowing in the corner. Simple details that, to him, felt like luxury. That night, Elijah lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. The soft mattress felt strange after so long sleeping on cardboard or concrete. The sheets smelled of lavender, and for some reason, that made him cry in silence. Because there, alone in the dark, far from cameras and praise, the truth hit hard. Starting over hurts. In the following days, Elijah split his time between the community center and his son's home. He ate breakfast in silence, walked Micah to the door, and then headed to the project. Life seemed calm, but inside, a storm followed him with every step. Small triggers brought back memories of the lost years. The dining table reminded him of Lorraine serving coffee. The hallway echoed with memories of laughter and arguments. All of it rekindled an old pain that still had no name. Micah, on his side, tried to handle the new presence in his home with care. He avoided direct questions, respected his father's space, but watched everything. He noticed how Elijah washed his own dishes, folded every piece of clothing with extreme precision, and turned off lights as if afraid of spending too much. He was a man relearning how to exist. 15 days after the foundation's launch, Elijah was invited to speak at a closed event with investors and community leaders. The goal was to present the project's initial results and reinforce the commitment to expansion. "They don't want to hear me," he told LeBron, hesitant. "They want numbers, data, important people." "They need to hear you," LeBron replied firmly. "Because the number that matters most is your story." The room was full. Men in suits, women in high heels, phones on silent. When Elijah stepped onto the stage, holding a small sheet of paper, the murmurs stopped. He started slowly, his voice low but steady. "I'm not a speaker. I don't have a degree. I wasn't trained for this. But I know what it's like to go weeks without hearing someone say, 'Good morning.' I know what it's like to be treated like part of the scenery. And I know what it's like to get a second chance, even when you don't believe you deserve one." There was silence. Then, applause. Long, honest. The presentation lasted no more than 7 minutes, but it was enough to secure donations and partnerships with 3 new cities. Micah had watched the talk live, hidden at the back of the room. He saw his father standing tall, chin up, posture firm. It was the first time he had seen him like that. Not as the broken man he had left behind, but as someone who had rebuilt himself with his own hands. On the way home, they shared the same car. Micah broke the silence. "You spoke well today." "I was shaking inside," Elijah replied, laughing. "No one could tell." Another pause. Then Micah asked something he had been holding in for days. "Do you think about her? About Mom?" Elijah took a deep breath. He looked out the window for a few seconds before answering. "Every day. And there are still days I say, sorry, for letting everything fall apart after she was gone." Micah didn't reply, but his eyes welled up. There, between father and son, there were no more accusations, only wounds that were slowly starting to heal. As Elijah's life took a new direction, an old video surfaced online. Recorded by a passerby, it showed Elijah years ago, clearly intoxicated, shouting in the street, and being restrained by restaurant security guards. The video went viral quickly, and with it came the cruel comments. "This is the new national hero. Just another aggressive drunk." Knew there was something off about this story. LeBron's team got in touch immediately. They asked him to ignore it, to let the lawyers handle it. But Elijah knew this moment would come. And, contrary to everyone's expectations, he decided to speak. The video wasn't recent. It was over 6 years old. Filmed with a shaky phone, it showed Elijah Carter on a sidewalk, yelling, arguing with restaurant staff. He looked lost, his clothes dirty, his eyes empty. At one point, he tried to force his way inside and was held back. The video spread with the same speed as the redemption story. The tone, however, was different this time. Judgment, suspicion, cancellation, public reaction, social media was split. While thousands defended Elijah, others questioned if he was really the example people claimed. Knew something was wrong. Fooled LeBron. People don't really change. The project's sponsors were put on alert. Tabloid headlines exploded. The other side of Elijah Carter. Hero or hoax? When reporters asked LeBron James for a statement, he answered firmly, "What's in that video is the past. And I don't know a single human being who hasn't failed at some point. But I know very few who chose to rise. Like Elijah did. Still, the pressure grew. That's when Elijah asked to speak. Publicly. No filters. No script. A press conference was called. At first, LeBron tried to talk him out of it. "You don't need to justify yourself," he said. But Elijah responded calmly. "It's not for them. It's for me. I hid that part out of shame. But if this foundation carries my name, then it needs to carry my full truth." On the morning of the press conference, the room was full. Live cameras, microphones pointed. Tension in the air. Elijah stepped onto the stage, wearing his usual plain shirt. He looked straight at the crowd and began, "The video you saw is real. That man is me. Drunk, dirty, lost. That was rock bottom in my story." Pause. I could say it was an isolated incident, but that wouldn't be true. I lived many days like that. Days I'm ashamed of now, that cost me my home, my family, my son. Days that nearly took my life. Complete silence. Do you know what else is true? That I'm no longer that man. That every night I slept on the floor taught me something. That every person who ignored me helped me understand the silent weight of dignity. That every small gesture, like LeBron's, pushed me back toward the light. He took a deep breath. I didn't come here to be a hero. I came to be useful. And if my story inspires anyone, let it be because it shows that the fall is real. But so is recovery, as long as there's choice. And accountability, a slight tremble in his voice. If after all this, you still think I don't deserve to be here, I accept that. But know that I will keep helping. Even in silence, even from the outside. The room was completely still for a few seconds. Then, a woman in the audience started to clap, then another, and another. Within moments, the entire room was on its feet, applauding, not the perfect man, but the honest one. Micah was there, standing at the back of the room, watching his father speak with such strength, hiding nothing. He finally understood something no explanation had ever been able to make clear. Forgiveness didn't come from the absence of mistakes, but from the courage to face them. At the end of the press conference, Elijah stepped down from the stage. Before any journalist could reach him, Micah approached. "I saw the video," the son said. "I know," the father replied. Micah placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "And even so, I'm here." Elijah said nothing. He simply nodded, eyes filled with tears. At that moment, nothing else mattered. The aftermath of the press conference was greater than any previous video. What began with criticism ended in headlines like, "Man who fell and chose to rise, Elijah Carter silences the nation with honest, emotional speech." The project continued to grow. Supporters multiplied. But above all, Elijah's image was no longer the homeless man helped by LeBron. It had become something much bigger, a symbol that no one should be defined by their worst day. The months following the press conference were pivotal. Elijah Carter, once tied to a short and touching video, now represented something deeper. Living proof that falling doesn't have to be the end of the story. The Elijah Carter Foundation, originally planned to operate only in Los Angeles, opened its second unit in Atlanta. Then came Denver, then Baltimore. The project became a national model, studied by public and private organizations as a real response to homelessness. But for Elijah, the real impact wasn't in the numbers. It was in the eyes of the people who walked through the foundation's gate for the first time. He made a point of welcoming some of them himself, men and women with torn clothes, cautious eyes, weak voices. "I'm Elijah," he would say with a soft smile, "and I've been exactly where you are now." And that simple phrase broke down walls. The social workers, psychologists, and volunteers did the rest of the work. But it was Elijah's presence, as a living symbol that dignity can be restored, that made the difference. There was a young man named Reggie, 22 years old, who had run away from home after years of abuse. He'd been sleeping on the streets for 2 years. Elijah found him sitting on the sidewalk, the same spot where he had once asked for $5. "Sit here with me," Elijah said when he saw him. They talked for hours. Reggie cried, said he wasn't good enough, that no one had ever believed in him. "I used to think that too," Elijah told him. "But someone looked at me differently, and that was enough for me to try again. Today, I want to be that someone for you." Reggie was welcomed into the shelter. He finished high school, got a scholarship for a vocational course, and a year later, he came back as a volunteer. That kind of transformation didn't make the news, but it changed the world. LeBron James, meanwhile, refused any public credit. He continued donating, visiting the units, attending strategy meetings, but avoided appearing at events. "This is his story, not mine," he would say. Still, Elijah always reminded him, "Without your gesture, I'd still be begging on that corner." "And without your gesture," LeBron replied, "no one would have seen the real power of those $5. They became unlikely friends. Talked about everything: basketball, faith, regrets, the future. Elijah had even become a familiar face at Lakers games, always low-key, sitting behind the bench where few would notice, but LeBron noticed. He knew the man sitting there represented more than any trophy ever lifted on the court. At home, Elijah and Micah now had a routine. Not perfect, but steady. They had breakfast together, laughed at old shows, spoke about Lorraine with respect and tenderness. Micah was learning to be a son again, and Elijah, a father. Neither of them used big words to define it, but both knew. It was love, rebuilt with patience. Then, on an ordinary night, Micah walked into his father's room with a small gift box. "This is for you," he said. Elijah opened it. Inside was a wooden frame with 2 photos. In the first, Elijah on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard sign. In the second, Elijah on stage at the press conference, holding a microphone, eyes steady. Above the photos, a phrase: "You're not defined by where you fell, but by where you chose to rise." Elijah sat in silence for a long time. Then he looked up, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, son," Micah smiled. "And now, you can call me son again." In the exact spot where Elijah had asked for $5 for the first time, there was now a small bronze plaque, discreetly embedded in the ground. Something greater than hunger began here. Elijah Carter Foundation. 25 people would walk by and read it. Some left flowers, others donations. Many simply closed their eyes for a moment, because that place was no longer just pavement. It had become a living memory that hope doesn't need much to begin, just someone who sees another with humanity. Time passed, and with it, Elijah Carter's name faded from the headlines. Like all viral stories, his was slowly replaced by others. New faces, new scandals, new momentary heroes. But what didn't fade was what happened off-camera. The lives changed in silence. The reconciliations, the second chances. Elijah never sought fame, never wanted to turn his story into a spectacle. He just wanted to survive. And when he got the chance to live again, he chose to make it a lighthouse for others still lost in the dark. 1 year after the project began, a BBC journalist asked to interview him. Elijah almost declined. But LeBron, upon hearing about it, simply said, "This might be the last time the world pauses to hear this story. And stories like yours need to be told again and again." The interview was recorded at the Foundation's new headquarters, now 4 stories tall, with a job training center on the ground floor. Elijah sat in a simple chair, wearing jeans and a light blue shirt. The journalist began, "Mr. Carter, what would you say to the man who ignored you on that sidewalk, the same day LeBron James reached out?" Elijah smiled gently. "I'd say, it's okay. You didn't see me, but God did." Pause. Not everyone will reach out, but if just one person does, sometimes that's enough. Do you see yourself as an example? No, I'm just a reminder that no story is over as long as there's breath, and that $5 can open a door no one even knew was there. The journalist asked the final question. What was the moment you knew you had truly made it? Elijah paused for a few seconds before replying, "When my son called me Dad again." Silence. Hard cut in the edit. Black screen. And the words, "A coin doesn't change the world, but the decision to act does." The interview became one of the most watched that year. On the night of the Foundation's first anniversary, a dinner was held to mark the date. LeBron was there. So was Micah. Volunteers, former homeless people now employed, friends, project partners. It was a quiet, intimate celebration, but filled with meaning. At the end of the event, Elijah was called to the stage. But before he could speak, LeBron took the microphone. "Tonight, I want to say something I've never said publicly. Elijah, that day, I was also tired. I was also discouraged with the world. And your humility reminded me why I do what I do. You didn't just change your story. You changed mine too." They embraced. Long, silent. Met with a standing ovation. Elijah didn't give a speech. He simply said, "I'm grateful, but the work has only just begun." In the months that followed, the Elijah Carter Foundation would become an international reference. Elijah would decline invitations for political positions, awards, and biographies. "I'm not a hero. I was just saved, and now I want to help save others," he would always say. In a small notebook, kept with him every day, were simple notes, names of people he'd met on the street, phrases he'd heard in his darkest moments, important dates. But on the last page, there was a single sentence. "Thank you for not giving up on me." LeBron years later, when Elijah Carter was already an old man, the sign on the corner of Sunset Boulevard was still there, untouched. Many passed by it without knowing the story. Others stopped and left coins. But from time to time, someone would sit there holding a cardboard sign and receive help from one of the Foundation's volunteers, often without realizing they were standing exactly where it all began. $5. A choice, a gesture. That's what changed the course of one life. And with it, the destiny of thousands more.